The woman with the shock of painted red hair, her body wrapped in a fur coat, and a pet monkey grinning and holding tight to her neck was Anita Berber. She danced across the foyer of the Adlon Hotel, opened her sable coat, and revealed her naked body underneath. Men leered, women giggled or turned their heads in shock and embarrassment. There wasn't much to embarrass the public in 1930s Germany. This was the era of Weimar Germany, an era of poverty and sin. Anita Berber didn't care. She liked to shock. She liked the attention. If she didn't get it, she would shout and throw empty bottles or glasses on the floor. Her entire sense of self was external. She was a dancer, an actor, a writer, and a model. She was called the goddess of the night, the priestess of debauchery, the very symbol of Weimar decadence, and a drug-addled degenerate. She was all these things and more during her brief, sad life. The daughter of two musicians, Anita was born in Dresden or Leipzig in 1899. Accounts differ. Her father was the former child prodigy Felix Berber, first violinist with the municipal orchestra. His wife was Anna Lucia Thiem, and she was a cabaret singer and dancer who later divorced Felix when Berber was just 4 years old. Berber was raised mainly by her grandmother in Dresden. In 1913, at the age of 14, Berber studied dance at Emile Jacques Dalcroze's school in Hellerau, which included training in rhythmic gymnastics, harmony, and music. The next year, she left to study ballet in Berlin with Rita Saccheto. Saccheto was a muse to artists Gustav Klimt and Koloman Moser. They designed the sets for her performance in 1906. And this way of life may have inspired young Anita to want to be the same. Saccheto was known for developing a style called Tanz Bilder, which involved novel dance interpretations of great works of art or poems, with costumes designed by Saccheto herself. Unfortunately, she was shot in the foot by one of her husband's friends in 1924, revealing the kind of life she led, and she retired to Poland that year. She would outlive her most famous student. Back in 1917, when Berber was 16 years old, she made her debut as a cabaret dancer, and in 1917 she was working as a fashion model for Dame. This was dangerous work for a young girl, but Berber embraced it. Her father seemed to have no time for her, as together with his academy colleagues Valentin Hartel, Johannes Hagar, and Anton Huber, he formed the Berber Quartet in Munich in 1917. In 1918, he was on a world tour with Johannes Brahms himself. In 1920, he was appointed full professor at the Munich Academy of Music. Berber's parents divorced when she was young, and she had quit the family home for the unpredictable life as a dancer in cabaret shows. The First World War was at its bloodiest height when she was dancing on the stage. The daily reports of casualties and death made some people reckless. What did they have to live for when they were pitted against their own European brothers? Employment was hard to find with so many men, so many leaders at the front or dead. Factories remained unmanned and unbuilt. Family units were split as housing became scarce, and strange lodgers entered people's homes and lives. Drug use was common. Prostitution was encouraged by the media and by doctors who hadn't had to go to the front. The chaos of the era enabled Berber to start a series of relationships and dangerous habits that became her life. After World War I, Berber began her career as a movie actor, starring opposite Conrad Veidt in The Story of Dida Ibsen in 1918, and then in Prostitution and Around the World in 80 Days the following year. The Yellow House, or I Buy You, or Prostitution, the film of 1919, provided employment for the pro-transgender and genital mutilation doctor, German Jew Magnus Hirschfeld, who served as an advisor on the piece. While Conrad Veidt went on to become a major movie star with a career in Hollywood, potentially serving as the inspiration for Batman's Joker, Berber's career stalled. One could argue Veidt was simply the better actor and had Christopher Lee among his fans. Regardless, Berber became best known for her performances as a dancer, a sultry temptress, or a drug-addled prostitute. Between 1918 and 1925, she appeared in 25 films. In 1920, she appeared alongside Dadaists in a political cabaret called Schall und Rauch, and you can learn more about the Dadaists in the Black Dahlia videos on this channel. Berber's dance style was ballet-based, with some acrobatics and belly dancing mixed in. She wore heavy dancer's makeup, which on the black and white photos and films of the time comes across as jet black lipstick, painted across the heart-shaped part of her skinny lips and charcoaled eyes. With her dark bobbed hair and androgynous face shape, Berber created a style that was copied by Marlene Dietrich, who basically stole her act and added singing. Leni Riefenstahl, who idolized Berber, was her understudy and had a brief, intense relationship with her. Louise Brooks, whose seductive image in Pandora's Box was a copy of Berber's and indeed a continuation of the Berber character in 1918. But women had dressed as men for decades before Berber. French actress Gabby Delise did it, as did Edwardian actress Maud Adams, and you can learn about both on this channel. One could argue Berber was the original hedonist sinner on film. Her life would not have been possible if the Weimar Republic hadn't encouraged every facet of it. You can learn more about the Weimar Republic on this channel. Berber had relationships with both men and women. Differences between men and women were ignored or struck down by doctors like Magnus Hirschfeld. Karl Topfer contends that no one of this era was more closely associated with nude dancing than Anita Berber. A contemporary of Berber, choreographer Joe Jensick, described how the public never appreciated Anita's artistic expression, only her public transgressions in which she trespassed the untouchable line between the stage and the audience. She sacrificed her person to a self-vivisection of her life, like a prostitute. In 1919, she entered into a marriage of convenience with a man named Eberhard Philipp Engelhard von Nothesens. He was 4 years her senior, seems to have come from money, and died in 1942. She soon left him to pursue a relationship with a man named Susie Winowski, and they became part of the Berlin lesbian scene. Supposedly, she also had an affair with Marlene Dietrich during this time. Berber's second marriage in 1922 was to Sebastian Drost. This lasted until 1923. In 1925, she married an American dancer named Henri Chatin Hoffman. They embarked on a tour around Europe, ending in Zagreb, Croatia, where Berber was arrested for insulting the King of Yugoslavia and spent time in jail. After Hoffman managed to secure her release, they continued around the Mediterranean and the Middle East. In Berlin, they caused a stir with a completely naked dance inserted into a film screening of Dante's Divine Comedy. Their romance has been detailed in the magazine Die Bühne of 1930. Hoffman was 1 year Berber's junior, and he remarried in 1930 after Berber's death. He was the only son of the German-American pastor of the Zion Lutheran Church of Baltimore. He spent many years as a patient in Spring Grove, a state hospital at Baltimore, where he died in January 1961 as a result of his hectic and crazy life. He is buried at Western Cemetery in Baltimore, Maryland. Berber and Winowski became a fixture of Berlin's growing lesbian scene. The lesbian scene was separated into various tiers based on financial status, with young women trafficked in bars at the lowest levels, and salons held referring to Oscar Wilde at the highest. Berber enjoyed alcohol, opium, hashish, heroin, and cocaine, which she kept secreted in a silver locket around her neck. She was photographed in the locket, and its presence gave her the nickname the Snow Queen. She entertained visitors while taking baths. Her second husband supposedly ran off to America, taking most of her money and remarrying. This was Hoffman. She also had a strong predilection for ether and chloroform mixed together in a small china bowl, into which she scattered white rose petals. Once these were sufficiently marinated in this concoction, she ate the petals one by one until she fell into a deep sleep. One may think this was a cute little morning ritual, but German currency meant almost nothing due to hyperinflation, and many Germans starved. Germany's national debt was substantially increased by 50 billion marks of reparations after World War I, payable in cash and in kind with coal and timber, under the May 1921 London Schedule of Payments, agreed after the Treaty of Versailles. Germany suspended its gold standard of currency in 1914, and without raw material backing its money, hyperinflation took off. In 1922, American banker J.P. Morgan involved himself in devaluing the German mark further, a huge cautionary tale in letting foreign bankers mess with any national policy. Various measures were introduced by German authorities to address the devaluation, including a new currency called the Rentenmark, backed by mortgage bonds, later itself replaced by the Reichsmark, and the blocking of the National Bank from printing further paper currency. So Germans' houses and land became the backing of their own currency. A strong merchant class, bolstered by the opening of German ports during and after World War I, insisted on being paid back instead of forgiving their own supposed people. So globalist banks revalued Germans' houses, slashing value to recoup their losses. Germans could not afford meat. In 1922, for example, meat consumption had not increased since the war. At 22 kilograms per person per year, meat consumption was less than half of the 52 kilograms consumed in 1913. Immediate post-war industrial production fell to the levels of the 1880s, or 57% of the total economic value in 1913. So the German economy was operating at around only half of its capability due to dead men, empty fields and towns, empty factories, and cities where people could not afford food and were encouraged to sell themselves at any age. Berber's louche lifestyle, coupled with her fame as a movie star and dancer, meant she was the subject of gossip. It was said over black coffee she was once kept as a sex slave by a married woman and her 15-year-old daughter. Berber fueled the gossip mag industry. It was said Berber took photographs for various fetishes and then sold them. She wore corsets way too low, revealing her thin body. It was claimed she wandered through casinos and hotels flashing people. She was certainly photographed naked multiple times. While in the bars, it was overheard that she exhausted her lovers with her insatiable demands. She had a dance routine that involved multiple white mice, reflecting Berlin's White Mouse Cabaret, with its audience wearing black or white masks to conceal their identities. Berber had a troupe of 6 teenagers under her command and encouraged them to behave exactly as she did. As biographer Mel Gordon writes in The 7 Addictions and 5 Professions of Anita Berber, Berber is described as a stripper, but she displayed the passion of a serious artist, responding to the audience's heckling with show-stopping obscenities and indecent provocations. Berber had been known to spit brandy on them or stand naked on their tables, dousing herself in wine while also urinating. It was not long before the entire cabaret one night sank into a groundswell of shouting, screams, and laughter. She jumped off the stage in fuming rage, grabbed the nearest champagne bottle, and smashed it over a businessman's head. According to translator Merrill Cole in the introduction to the 2012 reissue of Dances of Vice, Horror, and Ecstasy, a book of expressionist poems, essays, photographs, and stage designs, which Drost and Berber co-authored, even the biographical details seduce. A bisexual, sometimes prostitute, and a shady figure from the male homosexual underworld, united in addiction to cocaine and disdain for bourgeois respectability, both highly talented, expressionist-trained dancers, both exhibitionists, set out to provide the Babylon on the spree with the ultimate experience of depravity, using an art form they had helped to invent for this purpose. Their brief marriage and artistic interaction ended when Drost became desperate for drugs and absconded with Berber's jewels. Berber's penchant for haunting Weimar Berlin's hotel lobbies, nightclubs, and casinos, radiantly naked except for an elegant sable wrap, a pet monkey hanging from her neck, and a silver brooch packed with cocaine, is also included. In Empire of Ecstasy, Nudity and Movement in German Body Culture from 1910 to 1935, Topfer draws heavily on Czech choreographer Joe Jenček's eyewitness observations to reconstruct Berber's most notorious dance, cocaine. It begins with the ominous scenery by Harry Tauber, featuring a tall lamp on a low cloth-covered table. This lamp was an expressionist sculpture with an ambiguous form that one could read as a sex object, an abstraction of the female dancer's body, or as an image of a syringe, because a long, shiny needle protruded from the top of it. It is not clear how nude Berber was when she performed the dance, but she may have been fully nude. Jenček, writing in 1929, flatly stated she was nude, but the famous Viennese photographer Madame d'Ora, real name Dora Kalmu, took a picture entitled Cocaine in which Berber appears in a long black dress that exposes her top, but whose lacing up the front reveals her flesh to below her navel. In any case, according to Jenček, she displayed a simple technique of natural steps and unforced poses. But though the technique was simple, the dance itself, one of Berber's most successful creations, was apparently quite complex. Rising from an initial condition of paralysis on the floor or possibly from the table, as indicated by Tauber's scenographic notes, she adopted a primal movement involving a slow, sculptured turning of her body, a kind of slow motion effect. This turning represented the unraveling of a knot of flesh, that globalist belief that we are all bodies and there is no soul. But as the body uncoiled, it convulsed into separate parts, producing a variety of rhythms within itself. Berber used all parts of her body to construct a tragic conflict between the healthy body and the poisoned body. She made distinct rhythms out of the movement of her muscles, demonstrating her belly dance capabilities. She used unexpected counter movements of her head to create an anguished sense of balance. Her porcelain colored arms made hypnotic, pendulum like movements, like a marionette. Within the primal turning of her body, there appeared contradictory turns of her wrists, torso, ankles. The rhythm of her breathing fluctuated with dramatic effect. Her intense dark eyes followed yet another slower rhythm, and she introduced the most refined nuances of agility in making spasms of sensation ripple through her fingers, nostrils, and mouth. Yet, despite all this complexity, she was not afraid of seeming ridiculous. The dance concluded when the convulsed dancer attempted to cry out with the blood red opening of her mouth and could not. She then hurled herself to the floor and assumed a pose of motionless, drugged sleep. Her dance dramatized the intense ambiguity involved in linking liberation of the body to nudity and rhythmic consciousness. The dance tied experience to an encounter with vice, addiction, and horror, the acute awareness of our own death. Some of the rumors about Berber were false, most were true, but all of them kept her fixed in the public's imagination and as the poster girl of the Weimar era. In 1921, she met and fell in love with the Sebastian Drost, the bisexual dancer who was known as a performer in Berlin's gay bars and clubs. You can learn more about these clubs in the Weimar Republic video on this channel. The two became lovers and they both married in 1922. It's possible that both were Jews. They formed a scandalous dance partnership, choreographing and performing together in expressionist fantasias like Suicide, Morpheum, and Madhouse. They collaborated on the book of poetry and photographs recently republished, Dances of Vice, Horror, and Ecstasy, which shows images of violence, Berber's head cut off and held by Sebastian, for example. The normalization of domestic violence was becoming all too common. One of their typical routines went something like this and was designed to shock rather than have any inherent artistic value, despite modern critics hailing their efforts as expressionist. In the dance, mention or people we find only two people, two naked people, man, woman, and both in a cage, hard, stiff, horrible cages. The two king's children sang songs, but with tears. The man smashes his cage. Tradition, society, convention he spits out. Their displays were attractive to the Bolshevik and communist factions rising around Europe at the time. This is the kind of nonsense we nowadays associate with the overly pretentious rather than the naturally gifted. Berber's and Grost's relationship was intense, passionate, and drug-fueled. Because of her considerable use of cocaine, she often hurled champagne bottles at the audience if they failed to appreciate her genius. It was inevitable their marriage would not last long, and they separated in 1923. If you are interested in a legitimate glimpse into this life from the German perspective, watching series Babylon Berlin, which takes a hard look at Weimar Germany, might give it to you. Grost was a writer and 1 year Berber's seniors. 15 poems and grotesques appeared from him across 12 editions of German journals, alongside other artists and poets such as Kurt Schwitters and Paul Klee. He alternated between publishing under the name Willy or Willy Knoblauch, which was his given name. Also in 1919, he published a drama in the Dresden-based expressionist journal, Mention. In 1925, after his breakup with Berber, he met with photographer Francis Brugier in New York City, where he styled himself as the Baron Droste. Together they composed over 60 photographs for a proposed expressionist film starring Drost, tentatively titled The Way. UFA GmbH rejected the proposal, and the photographs were instead published as part of a photographic journal in De Dam in July 1925, the same journal that Anita had modeled for years earlier. Drost was diagnosed with tuberculosis in early 1927. He returned to his parents' home in Hamburg, where he died in June of that same year. By the time Otto Dix painted his famous red portrait of Berber in 1925, the years of drug abuse, frenetic lifestyle, and lack of nutrition was plain to see. The painting looks more like a woman in her 50s than a 25-year-old. The woman who once scandalized Berlin with her androgynous looks, her erotic and seductive dances, and her sultry on-screen appearance was no longer so appealing. She was out of favor as a younger generation of ingenues took over. Indifferent audiences no longer found her shocking, and her increasingly erratic and violent behavior led to a European-wide ban by the International Artists' Union. So she began touring her dance shows outside of Europe. During one such tour in Damascus, Syria, she became fatally ill with tuberculosis, the same disease that would claim her second husband. Germany had been able to rely on international trade routes, bringing coffee to the Republic while so many Germans starved. Berber returned home to Berlin, where she died, surrounded by empty morphine syringes, in November 1928. Alternately, she died in a Kreuzberg hospital. She was 29 years old. She was buried in a pauper's grave, which remains unknown, with an attendance of drag queens. Even her ex-husbands didn't bother to attend, nor did her father. She may have been long forgotten had it not been for Dix's portrait and her appearances in films that kept her legend alive. The Nazis certainly remembered the impact Berber had, encouraging young women to travel her same path of use and abuse to early graves, and they seized the painting, but they did not destroy it. Some scholars have suggested that the Nazis did destroy film of Berber's nude dancing. Many are encouraged to look up to Berber, especially today. Isn't she so free? Isn't she so cool, so cutting edge, such a hedonist? But she wasn't. She was a product of the times she lived in. Maybe she didn't even want to be any of those things. She was encouraged to be debauched. She was tolerated and then discarded by a society upon which she has left no positive legacy.